Hi, welcome Consumer Affairs Meet the Expert. I'm here with Dr. Ken Tudor, the contributing editor for Consumer Affairs Dog Food Guide. Thanks for joining us today, Dr. Tudor. What are the top 3 most important factors when selecting a dog food?
This is really a good question. Of course, that's going to vary from individual to individual in terms of their preferences, especially in this day and age with the superfood craze. But my 3 criteria are: number 1, the guaranteed analysis on the bag. The Association of American Food Control Officials requires that every bag of dog food have a guaranteed analysis that has a minimum information about the percentage of protein, percentage of fat, percentage of moisture, and percentage of fiber. The second is availability. You need to pick a food that is readily available so that if an individual runs out, they don't have to switch brands on their dogs. Switching food brands can cause severe and prolonged digestive upsets in dogs. And so I try and hope that owners will make sure that the food they have chosen isn't too exotic and they have ready access to it. And then the third criteria, which is kind of unique to me, is I would like to see people make sure that the food that they buy is actually manufactured by the brand name. Most dog food in the United States is made by co-packers, meaning the company or the brand office is just a corporate office, and somebody else makes their food in addition to many other foods. It's this co-packing that has got us into this recall problem, because if you look at the FDA recall list, what you'll notice is that various brands that are recalled all have the same co-packer, because once a facility is contaminated, it's contaminated for all brands.
In the guide, we have listed 3 types. What are the main factors that go into selecting what type is best for your dog?
Yeah, you're going to find my answers a little bit different. Age and weight aren't too much of an issue, because older animals basically need a lot of the same nutrients as young. And weight is a function of just how much you feed, and not really a function of the food. But there are some things that I think are extremely important. Breed is one, and that is because toy and miniature breeds really aren't fond of dry food. And there's this mistaken notion that dogs have to have dry food. They do much better with wet food. Health issues is another one. Many health problems do better with canned or semi-moist food. The other and the third one I think is extremely important is respecting the individual preference of the dog. It's not spoiling a dog to feed them the food they want. I mean, after all, we want them to eat consistently, even when they're not feeling well. The fourth is the nutritional lifestyle. The fifth for the factors is the owner's preference. A lot of owners do like the convenience and the cost benefit of dry and semi-moist, and I think that needs to be respected. And some owners feel that wet is not as convenient as dry or semi-moist, and so they would prefer to use those brands. And certainly it's easier to travel with dry food and semi-moist food than it is with canned food. All of these owner preferences, I think, are part of deciding which type of food will be right for the owner and the dog.
If someone was to walk into a store, what would you tell them before they purchased any dog food?
My number 1 question would be, did you come in this store to purchase or change food because of advertising, because of a salesperson, or because of some friend who is just super excited about their particular food? That is the worst reason, because if you don't come in prepared with knowledge of what your dog needs from your veterinarian and other health professionals, you are going to be overwhelmed by the hundreds of foods on the shelf, and you're going to be prey to the salespeople. You want to be prepared before you step in a store, because you'll end up walking out with a lot more stuff, or even the wrong food for your dog.
What are some of the other common mistakes when choosing a dog food for your dog?
By far, number 1 is fixating on the latest buzz. Right now, the latest buzz is grain-free versus grains in the diet. There is so much misconception around that. Another buzz is meat versus byproduct. Later on in this discussion, I'll tell you there isn't much difference between meat and byproducts. And so this buzz is leading people to make much more costly decisions about food than they need to. And then, of course, the whole idea of filler, which has no definition and is often attributed to grains, when grains actually contribute vitamins, minerals, carbohydrates, whereas fiber would be a true filler, but nobody seems to be upset about the citrus pulp or the beet pulp in their dog's food. So we got to stay away from buzz. And the second thing is assuming that all of your dog's skin and digestive problems are a result of food and diet. That is actually not the case. Most of the time, even though I do nutritional counseling, I make sure that we've had a thorough workup on these animals because most of the time they have a disease condition that's causing this, and we can use food to help manage it. But just switching up foods constantly isn't going to be the answer. Third is assuming that a hypoallergenic diet or dog food, something that has duck and potato or venison and potato, is somehow going to prevent allergies in your dog. That's not the case. Allergies is a genetic predisposition. And if you're going to become allergic, you're going to become allergic. The fourth would be purchasing too large a bag. What folks don't realize is the minute you open a bag of dog food, the air begins to oxidize a lot of the minerals, vitamins, a lot of the fats, and because most dog foods are using natural preservatives like vitamin C and vitamin E, those are all subject to degradation by oxygen. And so if you get a bag that's going to last you 2 or 3 months, by the time you get to that 3-month period, a lot of the vitamin and preservative value and fat value has long evaporated. And this is true even if you keep it in a closed container. So I recommend that people buy food for about 3 weeks to 4 weeks. And that way they can feel assured that the very last bite is as good as the first bite.
Reading and understanding dog food labels or the material on Dog Food Maker's website can be confusing. In fact, the information may be misleading. What are a few helpful tips you can give to pet owners?
Okay, the first is the first ingredient myth. It is an absolute myth that if the first ingredient is a meat, that is the largest ingredient in the ingredient list. The ingredient list is listed by the weight of the contents. What AAFCO allows manufacturers is to include the water weight of the pre-cooked meat. Therefore, when they put a meat first, it includes 70 to 75% water, which means that it is not the largest ingredient in the dog food. And if you want to know which protein is actually the most, would be the next protein. And so those typically are meals. And so it's not uncommon to see a product like duck, and it will be the first ingredient. And then the second ingredient will be poultry meal. And actually that's a poultry meal diet and not a duck diet. So that's a complete myth about the first ingredient. The other thing is the words they use on labels are totally misleading because they don't have any legal meaning. Holistic, premium, wholesome have absolutely no legal meaning. So those foods don't have to meet any criteria that is different from brands that don't use those foods. Natural and organic, although they do have legal meanings, are somewhat tenuous. Let me give you an example. Natural can be anything, an animal, plant, vegetable, mineral, anything from the earth or the air, or the water to be natural. And as long as AAFCO defines it, it's natural as long as it isn't processed by synthetic method or contains synthetic products. But they have a caveat that if they put a disclaimer that synthetics were added, they can still call it natural. Feeding instructions are my big bugaboo because people don't realize how detailed they are. In other words, the feeding instructions are always for ideal weight, not present weight. So if a person has a 25-pound obese dog and they're feeding based on 25 pounds on the label, they're overfeeding their dog consistently. The other thing is that the feeding instructions, especially for dry food, are instructions for an 8-ounce cup. And in America, we use cup interchangeably. You use a cooking cup, and then we have our word cup. And I've had clients come in and tell me that they only feed a cup, and what they meant was a big gulp cup. And so the meaning of cup has been distorted. It is an 8-ounce measuring cup. The other thing that people don't know is the instructions are for the daily requirement. It's not a meal allotment. It is what the animal needs for the entire day, not each meal. And then the other thing I would say is weight reduction labels. Weight reduction labels, if they say has more calories less than, all they have to prove is that this particular weight loss or weight control food has less calories than the specific thing they're comparing it to. The other one is this notion of breed specificity food. And it is a total marketing ploy, unfortunately, because if you look, and I have looked at these companies that have breed specific, and you look at the first 11 ingredients, you'll find that they're almost virtually the same for every animal. So there's really nothing different about the ingredient mix. Now, what they will do oftentimes is put in certain additives that are specific for medical problems common to that breed. But here's the problem. They typically put it in amounts that are far too short of having any medical relief, giving any medical relief, number one. And number two, it gives the idea that feeding this food is going to prevent the medical conditions in the breed, and that's simply not true. And then the last is, I would tell you, you can't compare the guaranteed analysis for wet and dry food or semi-moist and dry food directly because the water content. So you can't see a can that says 7% protein and say, well, it has less protein than this bag of dog food, which has 21, which in fact, if you do the math, the canned dog food is actually about 40% protein after you subtract out the water. So people have that mistaken idea as well.
Thank you, Dr. Tudor, for your time today. For more information, make sure to check out the Consumer Affairs Dog Food Guide and be sure to keep an eye out for the other Meet the Expert segments. Finally, thank you for joining us today, and remember, at Consumer Affairs, we've got your back.